To begin, it would be fair to say that the amount of games which require 50 hours of investment or more is a limited sum. Certainly a bevy of RPGs, both from the West and East, a couple of strategy games, and in the modern era, survival games such as Valheim. Over the past decade of releases, the complete experience is grasped within a tidy 10 to 15 hours, with a series of collectibles or remaining trophies, possibly enticing a select amount of players to add on a dozen or more hours in playtime. Yet, it is the venerable MMORPG which is intended to act as both a video game and an intelligently designed escapism transport vessel, whisking you out of your ordinary life and into an environment which can sustain full-on shifts of virtual interaction. While many MMOs focus on complex systems to induce grind, they are much like supercars revving up to max speed. The process of getting in the car and bringing your foot down to the ground as far as it can go is almost always an enjoyable one. Yet, once you have achieved max speed, how much runway is left? How long can I, the proverbial driver, keep on going at this incredibly enjoyable top speed before I must inevitably begin to let my foot off the pedal and leave behind me the distance traveled? Moving forwards into this series of reviews, I will be playing the newest MMORPG I care to try out, produced by the newly minted Amazon Game Studios. While this is a new IP, not attached to any novels or previous game titles that I'm aware of, the release also coincides with the long drawn-out death of World of Warcraft, what was once the MMORPG, bar none, leaving a vacuum in the ecosystem to be filled by what we all presume to be a new titan. Whether it is true that one titan will be swapped for another, or the ecosystem will be claimed by a series of smaller yet valiant titles, is yet to be determined. In these reviews, I will simply focus on what I enjoy about the title, what stands out to me, and what makes the game fun as I continue to live in this new world. I feel as if, given the very time-intensive experiences which MMORPGs tend to be, that someone approaching a review of any one of them should reveal their biases. This may be as simple as having played one game for a long period of time, and as such, view other games in similar genres through the lens of that experience. It may be a disinterest in certain settings or gameplay mechanics which could proliferate into an experience. Personally, I have played many MMORPGs throughout my lifetime, and never truly stuck with any of them. I spent time playing WoW up until Burning Crusade, and left afterwards. I played RuneScape and maxed a few levels over a few years. Star Wars The Old Republic was briefly something I explored, but ultimately abandoned. Most recently, the MMORPG to pull me in the longest was Guild Wars 2, which I feel is an excellent title, beholden to a few old tropes of MMORPG design, which meant I migrated at the end of my character experience. Moving into New World, I am mostly a solo player. I've never participated in a guild, and many of the objects touted as offering complexity in popular MMORPGs are, to me, exhausting and nearly nauseating mechanics. Crafting systems which take ludicrous amounts of resources for limited return, endless waterfalls of items, multiple currencies whether basic, dungeon-specific, premium, or otherwise, and the forced interaction with other players for progress in the story or interaction with major pieces of content, such as dungeons. I like an MMORPG to offer me a world to be a member in, but like the real world, I still prefer to be an introvert, even here, quietly interacting with the realm around me, handling my own things and objectives. It is just good. Some things need to be elaborated on for their value to be witnessed. In truth, I think the combat of New World speaks for itself. Far too often, MMOs allow for a sort of animated chess piece combat, wherein you're standing in place, cycling between a few animations, healing or attacking, buffing or etc. These processes work fine, and they make absolute sense from a sustainable netcode perspective, yet it leaves the mind and hands mechanically unfulfilled. While some MMOs attempt to work in more action combat, late game you're often still relegated to cycling between 3 to 4 to 2 to 3 again if it's already up, and so forth. This is not the case in New World. It is closer akin to a Souls-like than it is World of Warcraft. You must dodge and use your basic attacks just as much as your abilities. This encourages, in simple terms, actual combat, instead of aggressive visual accounting, as MMO combat can descend into in many cases. There has never been a point in the game where simply leveling my rifle isn't enjoyable. Having to aim my own shot and being rewarded with a critical for scoring a good one is always going to be an enjoyable gameplay interaction. This combat allows for you to approach hostile interactions with a degree of confidence not dictated by levels or build quality. With a skill-based challenge, I have been able to defeat enemies far above my level, utilizing tactics from other games. I dodge at the right time, score a flurry of hits, move back, get a headshot before the enemy closes the gap, and we return to melee fighting. The dynamic approach offered for each fight, even if you're grinding against a specific type of enemy for a quest, is more enjoyable than the one-handed, never moving or dodging that I feel grows tiring in traditional MMOs. A special mention needs to go to the corruption events, which, as far as I know, randomly occur across the realm. These corruption events involve massive portals opening and demon-esque monsters appearing in the area around it. You are required to craft a specific sort of potion, otherwise, simply being in the area for too long will begin to cause you damage. However, once you progress with the story long enough to acquire something known as an Azoth staff, you can engage with these events not only by defeating the monsters, but by closing the portals altogether, allowing you the sort of finality and real cause and effect often missing entirely from MMO environments. Sure, another portal will certainly open in another region, but for the time being, you got to act as a hero and make the roads that little bit safer for everyone else, and that feels awesome. It is worth noting that as an inherently solo player, I haven't been enticed to try out the PvP even once. This is, however, something which I am slowly feeling drawn to. I've watched duels between other players which seem engaging, fair, and ultimately fun. The concept of the wars seems very cool, and like a farmer in a small medieval state, drawn into conflict because of the gold requested by the local lord, I am compelled to care about the state of these wars, whom is going to take over which area, and if the current owners are ousted, what happens to the local tax rates accordingly. I expect that PvP will be a fun challenge, yet insofar with a PvE focus, I have fought against skeletons, infected townspeople, corrupted monsters like ogres, wolves, bears, and different felines. I've hunted boar, elk, bison, rabbit, and an arrangement of farm animals. For all the uses of my weapons at this point, they're still fun to swing or shoot, and I look forward to adapting my strategies upon encountering new and varied entities. Personally, I find the variety to be fascinating, useful, and even the acquisition of more resources is in itself an enjoyable experience. I feel as if dedicating a portion of any session played to locating, pursuing, and acquiring these resources is as intended as could be, in that the hourly recall offered to the inn includes enough time to go handle a few quests, have a few combat interactions, but also, due to the imposition of expensive and specifically available fast travel, you're often in a place where you're coming across resources on a scale of value, almost all of them worth acquiring. From the simple hemp for fiber and iron veins for ore, the system begins to grow as your skills expand, allowing you to mine, chop, harvest, or otherwise interact with resources of a growing variety. Starting off, I was simply taking down trees and finding some herbs, but now I'm engaged with collecting wood from trees of different ages, collecting alchemy stones and different supplies across the realm for my potions. I can find oil deposits or metal to be refined for jewelry, such as silver and gold. Even the once unattainable star metal, after much dedication, has finally become something I can acquire and smelt. The acquisition of a higher level resource, however, highlights an intentional development decision to not allow the stagnation of lower tier resources. By this, I mean it is never not useful to collect iron. Whether it is for further refining steel, or using that steel to act as a composite for star metal ore, the crafting system incorporates items from across the resource ecosystem, even as your capability expands into creating quite powerful objects. As well, the resources acquired don't feel as if they're inherently destined for one recipe. As in, I may retrieve iron, but that iron could be spent on weapons, or armor, or ammunition. While the elementally charged items associated with alchemical resources can be used in items across the board, ranging from potions to weapons, and even repair kits. Further, these recipes can be augmented by swapping between resources that meet a certain crafting criteria, and allow for special modifier items, as well as Azoth sacrifice during the recipe creation. This concludes with a wide variety of methods to approach crafting or cooking, and further reinforces a sense of having options. An interesting component of the PvP system is that, while this stage in my time spent in the game, I've not personally interacted with it, it has interacted with me. The shifting state of ownership of the cities and settlements which I am traveling and working between affect the cost of everything from owning a home in such a settlement to the cost of refining materials and using their crafting stations. It is this exact dynamic which leads to a situation wherein I feel compelled to participate in the wars surrounding my favorite settlement, simply so that I can maintain the suitable tax rate proposed by the current leadership. There is an element of seeing the reason to fight, which breaks down the barrier between myself, the player, and myself, the character in this realm. My decision-making in both perspectives becomes mirrored, which leads to a completely enveloping immersion. Beyond this, New World has also tackled a component of game design which feels estranged in any sort of life simulation, outside the furthest reaches of science fiction. Often in a game, you just respawn. The option is present to you as a player, but completely dismissed within the narrative of the game itself. Infrequently are characters aware of this option that exists for you, how often you've done it, or anything similar. Yet in New World, it is explained right off the bat, or should I say boat, given how you start the game, that the island of Aeternum is stuck in a sort of cyclical state between life, death, undeath, corruption, and becoming existentially lost. It is within this churn that the world builds its logic and infuses sense into what have historically just been mechanics or gameplay expectations. Take, for example, respawning boars. In most games, you can personally fill in the gaps that respawning boars are the children of those previously hunted, those coming out from hiding to eat or seek a mate, that there are more burrows than you can detect where animals pop out at free will. Just as well, if you're the sort to never think on these things, it is entirely meaningless to you. Yet in this setting, when you kill that boar, it dissipates into the blue flames of defeat, just as a player does, and then respawns minutes later, emerging from that same blue flame. It is the conscious decision to state in the world building, yeah, that's what happens when you die here, and honestly, it's part of the whole goddamn problem we're facing, that allows for deeper immersion in the setting. That all these PvP battles over land, which would typically cause needless and constant bloodshed, are effectively spectacles over who can force the other one out of place, since just as it is for us the players, no one actually dies. It is their casual reality regarding lethal outcomes that lets factions otherwise working together resolve their disputes via literal mortal combat, without the implication of real-world repercussions that would degrade the camaraderie further. As I prepare for the next series of adventures in New World, I'm reminded, pleasantly, that I'm a no one in this realm. I may be someday, but at this time, I haven't fought through a small assortment of easily dispatched enemies in a series of caves and been heralded a hero of our time. I've dealt with some skeletons, learned to cook a mean sausage, and began my dive into hunting the supernatural forces at the edge of corruption.